Good evening, this is Backyard Reads, and today we're going to talk about the book Robot City by Michael P. Kubi McDowell, part of the Isaac Asimov's Robots. This is in a time when Isaac Asimov opened his kind of robot series and stories and world and laws and that to lots and lots of authors, any author who would want it. And so one case is the Robot City series, which is 8 books long. And I've only read the first one so far. My grandma has a few more. This is a pretty old book, and I highly doubt it's in print anymore or even available for sale. Unless you really look for it. This is an author of Emprise. I don't know what that is, but maybe I'll look into it. You know all those things that a lot of writing channels say you really shouldn't do? You shouldn't use the ly words, like the ly, like quickly or whatever after someone says something. It's said a lot in this book. A lot in this book. It's mostly a mystery. It's sort of a mystery. One of the mystery being the main character known as Derec, who wakes up in an emergency life pod that's operated by a robot, and he doesn't know anything about himself except he understands robots and stuff. Right, that's the only clue to his entire identity throughout the beginning of the book. From there, he finds out he's not drifting in space, but he's actually crash landed onto an asteroid. He doesn't know where he is or what he's doing there, anything like that. So he wakes up in this warehouse, this mining colony of robots. And it's a mining colony that is not mining for materials, but for something else, because there's no apparent thing. And one thing that's very notable by the main character is that it is entirely operated by robots. There is almost no human involvement whatsoever. And it involves other sciencey bits, like there's this sort of rebreather that allows them to breathe properly in this atmosphere, because it's not an atmosphere lacking oxygen altogether, but it has this nitrogen-based atmosphere where it's very thin, and it could easily mess him up unless he had this sort of rebreather. You can actually see the rebreather like here, right? There's several other illustrations in the back of this book, this section is titled the data bank, right? You can't really see it there, but you see a character profile on Derec. You see some other characters. You see robots like cargo porter robots, the breather, like I said, the Massey G85 survival pod, that's the evacuation boat pod, whatever, that I was talking about earlier. Then there's Monitor 5, there's Alpha, there's some robots, right? But yeah, there's the spaceship, and there's that. Oh yeah, the augmented work-suit, which is pretty interesting and kind of bulky. Then that's of that section. And then there's a bit on the actual author at the very back of the book. Apparently here is Michael P. Well, let's just call him MPK, right? MPK has actually been adapted as in the series of Tales from the Dark Side. Okay, that's something to look at. He's a kind of a scientist. But to continue on, there's the colony. After that robot colony, stress signal and intercepted by this ship. But it's a ship that's not of human origin, but actually alien, which is one of the primary reasons to why this book series was made is the alien aspect of it, to introduce other creatures other than humans and robots. That's what the guy wants. When the spaceship arrives, turns out they are hostile. They start destroying the asteroid and several other bits. The robots and there's a little bit of a like the three laws of robotics are in play throughout the book, which I will get into a little bit later. But this is just a quick rundown of the plot. Encounters aliens. He's captive by aliens for a while. And then there's this whole mystery of figuring out what seems like a MacGuffin, but it actually has a use. And then after the MacGuffin and several other things that happen, he arrives at the title of Robot City. That's the quick and dirty rundown of the story. And now that's a quick overview. I'm not going to spoil the rest of it. It doesn't really spoil anything because I am only hitting the base plot point. Like, if you would actually read it, you probably find it pretty interesting. The book isn't so much about the plot as in the style of any other sort of Isaac Asimov robot story. Usually the conflict involves the three laws of robotics, which I will try and find here. Here it is. The three laws of robotics is 1. A robot, and this is priority number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2. A robot must obey the orders given it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And 3. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. Now, the quick rundown of that means is that robots can't do shit to humans. If they would cause direct or indirect harm through they can't allow that, right? And you can find that there is a paradox in some cases of like, oh, if we tell them, if we do one thing, it might cause harm to a human, but if we don't do that thing, it might also cause a human. That might be a possible conflict. And like, if say, for the second law, if someone were to say like, hey, I want you to kill this guy, the robot could say like, no, I can't do that. It would harm a human. Or alternatively, like, the robots are aware that the manufacturing causes these sorts of chemicals or very dangerous chemicals that can actually cause harm or something else to a person, right? And if they're aware of that, they would be, and they're under orders for something, and that means like, okay, we have to put the human life above our orders, and so they would shut down their manufacturing if there was human presence. For the third law, it is pretty self-explanatory in that, like, it needs to actually be, like, it can't really serve humans or protect humans or do these sorts of things unless it can actually has a will or drive to want to continue living or existing. And so, unless, of course, it's like they're ordered to self-destruct, in which case it's like, okay, fair enough, well, a human told me to do so, so I will. And you find that a lot of the robot stories of Isaac Asimov are almost always surrounded by these three rules. And a lot of the conflict originates from these three rules. And you can find quite a few examples of these robots trying to follow these rules and going like, okay, I don't know exactly how to follow them. Like, for instance, with the life pod. There's one instance with the life pod. There's another instance with the actual mining base, and then there's another point while trapped on the alien ship. Then there's another conflict while they're on a station, and there are some points in this where the main character Derec is trying to circumvent or rephrase or using logic and science and all that to explain his rules or to bend the laws of robotics. In that aspect, it's pretty interesting to read, and a lot of it's very mystery based and all that. This is the first part. Like, the way it ends is also pretty interesting once they reach the robot city, and he like meets another human, and they arrive at the robot city, which is a city that's entirely run by robots. There's no human involvement whatsoever, and it's as a bit of science fiction. Like, if you're able to read this, it's pretty good. However, there might be some cases that you might go like, well, there are some parts where they're kind of explaining the plot or explaining something which can be a bit slow, but otherwise from that, it's not so bad. Besides, one thing that's really good about this is that it's a pretty short book. It's about 202 pages long, and each chapter is like, just a very quick and easy read in that sense. Like, you could easily read this all in one day if you wanted to. I'm not saying you should, and in fact, most people probably can't. One consistent thing is learning about the character Derec, where you find out where that's part of the mystery, and unfortunately is part of the kind of the common trope of the amnesiac. I hope I don't have to explain that can be that's been done to death. And that's a common bit of writing advice to avoid. That says, try not to do the amnesiac, and if you do, try to do it interesting and new. As I was saying earlier, it involves aliens this time around, and some of them are pretty interesting in the idea of them. However, it's because it's probably the first book, it's not entirely fleshed out. But then again, it's also from a perspective that this is the first time that this is like first contact for humans that have ever seen aliens in Isaac Asimov's world, or at least the canonized Isaac Asimov's world. For a first time read, I would entirely recommend this. It is, however, not exactly the most poetic read, and it's not gonna absolutely blow your mind as some other things, but I would say it's very much like the common pulp book, and it's just a very quick and easy read. You can easily get into it. It doesn't take too much effort to get into, and if there's anything that's like kind of confusing, you can find a kind of a quick rundown in the back, right? You can look at the little introduction, like the introduction by, I think it's by Isaac Asimov, but I can't tell. It's written by Isaac Asimov himself, and it gives his quick rundown, his ideas of the robot series, and it's something that you can really get to understand the books and the other sorts of stories, and it would be actually a pretty cool thing to see, like a return to, like the Isaac Asimov's robots. However, with the early 2000s film of I, Robot, I don't think that's quite likely. The same with Millennium Man, I think that's his name. It's the one with Robin Williams. You're not really going to get the same thing. I doubt they're really going to ever do it again, and it's kind of a shame. However, it is also a little bit dated in the way that of the writing style. You would really need people to kind of really want to write with the robots. Not many people will probably even have read the robots, the Isaac Asimov stories as much anymore, because, well, there's so many authors since his time. They've developed and they took inspiration from him, made their own interpretation, and so on, so on, so on. If I was to recommend this, yep, I would totally recommend this, and I think it's just a good read. I hope you all have a lovely evening.